Just start. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again after a sumptuous lunch. I hope it won't put you to sleep, but we have an exciting topic here today, and we have a very exciting panel to have a good discussion with you here this afternoon. The topic, as of course you know from the program, is financing urban transport in China. No secrets here. China is massively investing in urban transportation. Over 30 cities are investing heavily in metro systems. World Bank is participating in some of them. And this expansion is going to continue as the pressure on the cities keeps growing. The urgency is obviously clear. And what we like to do in this session is to reflect on the challenges of financing the systems as well as the operations, so as to understand how much of this investment is possible and how much of it is still sustainable when you operate it into the future. So today we have a great panel, a very broad panel of very deep experience in this sector as well as in China. We have two speakers here who are going to present. I would first, in sequence of presence here, Mr. Daniel Bongardt, who is a Program Director of GIZ in China. Very pleased to introduce Madame Zhang Yullin, Director of the CATS in China, Chinese Academy of Transportation Science, part of Ministry of Transport. Very welcome. Mr. Zhang Haitao, Transport Pillar of EMBARQ in China. Mr. Steve Lewis-Workman, Senior Transport Economist in ADB. My colleague Fang from World Bank, Senior Urban Transport Specialist. And Mr. Jifu, welcome, Beijing Transport Research Center, an old friend of many of you. So with that, I'd like to, without much further ado, introduce speaker first, Mr. Bongardt, Daniel Bongardt, again, Transport Policy Advisor of GIZ in Germany. Before joining GTZ, he worked in the Wuppertal Institute for Climate and Environment with a special focus on energy transport in China. So he has a long history of researching this and working this. So, Mr. Bongardt, please, welcome. Your thing is underneath here somewhere.
So someone will take care of it. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Let me take the opportunity to thank the organizers to this great event and having the opportunity to discuss with you and so many knowledgeable people about transportation and the challenges we have. And I'm also enthusiastic about discussing with my colleagues on the panel here. So I guess I was invited to give a first introduction here because we did some initial work on urban transport financing in China. And it's a very important topic, and it's very important also in this area to learn from each other, to learn from the experiences in other countries, and to see what works and what to adapt this to local situation and to local needs and so on. So, but the starting point for working on transportation financing in China was certainly this question. So I call it the trillion RMB question, and how can urban transport funding in China become more sustainable and trigger more green transport development? And I think the question behind that is also, if you see the rapid development of the cities in China and all the great investments that have been made, also the city of Beijing, where I'm based in, is investing fantastically in transport development, in upgrading the system, not only the subway, but also their smart card system, IC system, and so on. So they have fantastic things going on. And this needs to be highlighted as well, I think. But at the same time, there's also the question, what comes in the future? And so can the funding of these investments, the operation and the maintenance be sustainable in the future? So there might be some challenges ahead that we have to look at. So one of the things I just picked up in the last weeks was some numbers on urban rail investment. And urban rail is certainly one of the driving things in China. And so the NDRC just approved 29 subway projects in 22 cities. And it's really a total investment of 1 trillion RMB in 2012. So, and then you have these increasing costs of the subway construction. So now it's 0.7 to 1.0 billion RMB per kilometer subway construction. So this increased in the last years quite a lot. But it's not only the investments. It's also the subsidies that are currently channeled into the public transport system. That are a major investment of the cities there. So it's a great involvement, a great enthusiasm about doing the public transport first strategies. And it's not only the cities, it's also the national government and the Ministry of Transportation that is putting forward quite an amount of money and also quite an effort to reach this out to all the hundreds of cities in China. So at the moment, there's quite a number of national funding already is existent. So we try to collect together the information from different programs. And so that I don't want to go through all the list, but I just want to mention the Transit Metropolis program and what the cities are doing there on urban transport. I guess also Dr. Zhang Yullin will speak more about it and will speak much more knowledgeable about it than I can do. So there's quite a number of efforts and there's quite a number of things going on, even if the overall scale at the moment in comparison to the total budget is limited. So in China, it's really that the cities are responsible for their transportation and sustainable transport investments and the decision making. And there is some facilitating role of the national government through guidelines, through these things, and it's taking up, I guess. So there are many ideas coming around this issue. But on the counter side, so there are also the financing issues, the problems we are encountering here. And I want to highlight the first issue, and this is the land concessions. As cities are responsible, of course, they need to raise funds. They need to get money. And so one of the ways in the past that has been done was through land sales or sales of land concessions so to the investors, to the developers, and that those income would then be also the basis for the discussion. So all the funding numbers, they are not so transparent. It's difficult to find them. But we have discussed with some experts, and they said it's 40 to 50% of the total investments coming through these land sales. And I must say there's also, of course, a great danger, because if you need for your transit or for your other investments, you need income, so you need to sell the land, which then triggers sprawl of the cities, which again requires more transit investment. So it's a vicious cycle that might be started here. But there are some others, so the debt accumulation in the cities, which is an issue that might be too much debt, but also you need some flexibility here, so that could be discussed as well. So there's no dedicated national fund at the moment, and so the tax revenues on the national level, they are, if they are earmarked, so the money is going into the highways and only very, very little share into some pilot programs. So this is on the investment side. And on the operations, so we also have the situation that no property tax exists, so the land value capture of all the investments in the public transit system is difficult. And we just learned also during the discussions in the last days during TRB also some issues that because of the plans are changed frequently, it's very difficult for the cities also to predict where the subway station will be, for example, and then the land price is not higher there than somewhere else. So fixed ticket fares, ticket policies from the cities, high subsidies for operation, and so on. There's some further challenges. I don't want to go into all the issues, but they are closely connected to financing transportation. And it's, of course, the institutional issues. So the complexity between the various institutions involved, organizations and sectors involved, so urban development, the transport ministry, but also then Ministry of Finance and so on, and when it comes to regulation, then later police, public security, and so on. So there's a lack of sometimes or often you observe a lack of horizontal coordination. At least it's a big challenge, and also the private sector involvement is of course not very much involved. So most is public state-owned companies. Second issue is planning framework. So the coordination between cities, we have heard about that before, and also the link to the urban development, so how the cities develop. So there's a focus rather on networks. It's a focus on networks rather than the users and the impacts of the developments. So a last issue that has been pointed out this morning already, and that we share maybe in several countries, is also then the capacity at the local level. So because of the rapid growth and the investment, so how to keep up with the capacity that is needed. And I think some cities in China, they have great research centers and capacity to do, but then also institutions like the China Urban Sustainable Transport Center are helping cities, and it's more efforts needed here to support this. And last but not least, also the assessment of the performance and the data is an issue that is very important. So what we did under this, in this situation, that we tried jointly with the EMBARQ and the Slow-Cut Partnership, and also with our partners in China, to bring together a group of both Chinese experts as well as international experts from various countries that are facing similar challenges. Because I think that's something that's really going on at the moment, that many countries share these kind of problems and concerns. And so we thought it's a good idea to just facilitate a little bit the discussion between that. So here's a picture of this group. It was at the Great Wall, nice setting, but in fact it matters about the people. And I must say I was very enthusiastic afterwards about the results, because people were so strongly engaged and committed to work here, and all the organizations here on the panel, they also have been involved in contributing to this. So I must say again, great thanks to that. So what we did is, after revisiting the challenges in China and getting input from Ministry of Finance, the NDRC, as well as the MOT, we then also presented some of the issues from the international level, and there's another session tomorrow. I don't want to go into the details here, but so several things are connected to this funding issue. And so I would also say some of the issues are listed in this report that is the output out of this workshop. So there are a couple of copies down here. If you're interested, you can take one. Otherwise, you can download on the www.sutp.org website or the slowcat.net website, where it will be put tonight. So we had then, on the second day of this workshop, we split up the participants in breakout groups, again following the principle of putting together expertise on Chinese situation and international expertise. And we got 4 groups that named themselves by these names. So, and in the end, it was interesting that a couple of ideas were consistent between the groups, and so it is very, very enthusiastic. I want, as an input to this discussion, present a couple of results and ideas that came out of this exercise. So we are now discussing in terms of the buildings block of sustainable urban transport financing in China, and I want to shift the attention both on the national as well as on the local level, and also the interaction between that. So it was suggested to have a national urban transport fund, to have something on the national level that allows the national level to support cities in their efforts, and to support it through funding for specific issues. And on the other hand, encouraging the cities and also enabling the cities to raise their own funds and use the possibilities we have through the travel demand management strategies. So the principle is to move away from the land concessions and establish new sources of funding and use it in the cities, the income from parking policy, from possibilities like congestion charging, but also things invented in China like the auctioning of license plates and so on. So second level of things that are important here is some guidance for cities. Cities are asking for guidance, maybe not in Beijing and in Shanghai, but in many other cities out there, they're asking for guidance and what's needed. But on the other hand, also requiring the cities to put together comprehensive mobility plans and show and demonstrate how they integrate their strategies and how they adopt the guidance, or what they make out of the guidance, or create new ideas here. So one issue we learned from the internationals is that also we evaluate the performance, and we get some mechanisms to see whether the comprehensive mobility plans are implemented in the end or not, how's the money spent, and so on. So a little bit of transparency is here required. And a last suggestion that was had quite some overlap between the various groups was further concentrating the responsibilities or unifying the responsibilities in terms of both on the national level, putting together those institutions that are responsible for urban transport so that we overcome the coordination challenge, and following this as well then on the local level. I don't go into the detail. There has been many other ideas around, so like things about debt management, about the private sector, about performance indicators, and so on. So it was a great output, I think, from the workshop. So, we already experienced that some of it has been taken up by organizations involved in this. So coming to the conclusion and to the final slide, I just want to put three things together, so that a national fund that is linked to any kind of comprehensive mobility plans and some guidance can then trigger policies and approaches in cities that raise more funding. So we need to make this rolling and enabling cities really to make financing of the transport systems more sustainable. And I'm enthusiastic because in China there's a lot of focus on this, and there are a lot of great people working on these issues. So I'm quite confident that all these things are taken up in the coming future. So one of the key issues is then, of course, moving away from the land concessions, which is a specific thing in China, where there is also a lot of difficulties to removing this because it's also needed by the cities. And I'm looking forward to the discussion also touching this issue. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dan, for that very illuminating discussion, and interested to see how the research and the ideas you're developing in this arena through your work and your workshops. And you mentioned guidance, and our next speaker, Madame Zhang Yullin, not only is Deputy Chief Engineer of the China Academy of Transportation Sciences, but I read from some of the work you've done that one of the recent achievements is drafting suggestions on implementing the strategy of prioritizing public transport. I'm not sure whether that's the guidance that's alluded to, but it sounds like it has everything to do with it. So if I may introduce Madame Jiang. Got it? Yep. That's the one. Okay? Thank you. Thanks.
Here. It's okay? I think that I take the opportunity to just say some few words. Actually, it's my pleasure to be here for in front of for the cross-track. We have been working long time for the World Bank and also the friends from European Commission. And thank you a lot. And here it's just a brief that what we are doing, and it's really the great works. I think we are trying to achieve. I think, as most people know, that it's we have 50% of people in the city currently. There is a huge demand for the transportation, and on the other hand, there is a model shifting. Used to be we are king of the biking, but today we have the more challenges for the public transportation as well as the bicycle. And compared with most of the cities, the public transportation we currently national level less than 20%, and even in the bigger city we still lack of the enough the public transportation capacity, and with the low speed and not on time and poor comfortable and transferring commons, and as well as the low coverage, that is the main problem. And I think one of the results is the increase of the car ownership that occurs to the congestion that everyone have to suffer. And at the national level, I think what we have done, I try to bring out currently in the past 4 years what the MOT have been done. Actually, the overview of the objective for the promoting the urban public transportation is I try to establish a national integrated transport network, and second, to decrease the gaps between the development between the rural and the urban area, as well as balance the transportation development with a high-quality service of public transportation. In that as a whole, one side is for the public transportation. I think everybody wants their quick, on-time, integrated, efficient, safe, green, and economic. And also, we have a very cheap public transportation system. And the role of the different government in the public transportation is the city government should be acting as responsible entity, and the provincial level have the monitoring and guidance responsibility. But for the national government, the issue, the policies and laws and guidelines, and all the departments have to be working together to realize the fast and they also grow in the economic development. Otherwise, will not be the possible. And it takes 4 years ago, the central government have decided to take the institutional reform as the first step. The administration of the housing they used to be managed the urban transportation have been the shifting to the administration of transportation. By then, the highway, waterway, and civil aviation as well power become one of the administrative. And then still have the administration of transportation on the freight and transportation. Particularly, that is the guidance in Chinese. That is the guidance. It's not totally managed. And in the administration of finance, they are working on the finance aspect. The administration of building and constructing of rural and rural and the urban. They're working on the urban master planning, rail transit planning, and construction. And still, administration of public security, working on the traffic safety and the fleet registration. Of course, NDRC, overall national economic and social development, in particular for the pricing control. So those are things I think will be in fact as the public transportation. And secondly, like, actually started 2009, they have the National Public Transportation Planning. That is the first first in the China history, we had the public transportation development, including the 12 5-year planning for the national economic and social development. That is very clearly to say it wants to enhance the share of the public transportation as well as the BRT, tram, whatever it's included. And the rail, as the colleagues have been told, there are huge improvement have been taken place. It will be by 2015, it will be 30,000 kilometers, and also in BRT, it's heavily invested from the cities. And the third one, the action is they have established the Urban Passenger Transport Standardization Committee, which is taking over all the buses and underground as well as the taxis, rail, and the rental car, whatever in the city. It will be looking at the safety, security, as well as the energy and emission, and through the infrastructure construction, come to the operation management particular. And this is the national standardization together with the MOT standardization, which will mostly help the sector to be more standardized. And the fourth action is the national metropolis program, and actually that is initially planned for the national transit-oriented development program. It's planned the 30 cities by 2050. And currently, Beijing, Shenzhen, there are already approved 15, and next two months, their application come to more, which is 15 out of 25 has been approved. And that means that there is the MOT cooperate with local government. The mayor is the major responsible for such of the project, and the monitoring the procedure will be as a tool through all the 5 years, or sometimes more than 5 years. And there is a clear. It says that the public transport sharing should be above the 45%. That, of course, that is a huge challenge, as well as other indicators. We have been developing about the 15 set of the indicators will be assessed through the way. And that's the most important is that just 2 weeks ago, the central government have been issued, the state council have issued the guideline for the promoting urban public transportation development in China. That is transforming transportation development patterns towards the public transportation as public good. That is through the strengthen the planning, control. I think that everybody knows that China have very strongly with the planning. And second is the speed up infrastructure construction, particularly for the bus lines as well as stops, whatever, and also the enhancing joint land and transport development. That's the newly. One side is enhance the efficiency, but on the other hand, it's a means for the local to finance the transportation as well. And in terms of increasing government investment, I give them more detail. There is a public transit is included in the city public budget. And the mass transit and the integrated hubs and the information center also will be getting funded from MOT, and free of the vehicle purchase tax. It used to be having tax for buses, and this will free already removed. And secondly, it will be electronically or power to be subsidized for the underground, and the fuel consumption subsidized for buses. And this is a particular for the fuel subsidy. We are almost 30 million for every year, and the value capture of integrated land and development with transportation. That is one which local government can use. And incomes of the staffs in the public transportation company, particular, should be increasing regularly it's not less than the city average income, because that is most important. Since the money drivers, they are go to the private company and go to the taxes, and that's the government. It says the salary will be kept going with the cost increasing, and of course there are a lot of ways to increase the government financing, and particular for they have the PPP model, and also for the private company can use the public transportation. They can also get the subsidy from government as well. Such of there is a money in detail. I had that the English one, and I will give the organizer, and someone can be shared in the electronically. And the second, ensuring the road right priority. That is the difficult things for I think for the policemen, and currently we are trying to work, and also the encourage ITS application. And it says that the card, the business, the IC card we use the nationally. If I'm taking the IC card Beijing and go to the Zhengzhou, can share the same rate with the local people, and also the improved ticketing pricing mechanism. That means the ticketing can be increasing. Of course, there is some procedure according to the cost, and actually there will be the one of mechanism for the local government to try to have the more capability. And the ninth one is set up the technical standardization system, then the implemented integrated transportation management, and that my colleagues have been talking about the TDM is one important finance tool, and also project traffic assessment. It will be implied in China very shortly. And of course, for the safety, that is the particular we are working about the underground. That's the particular very difficult things that we have to deal with. So there will be the more strengthened standardization, and also the monitoring tools will become up. And in the 12th, it will be regulating the decision-making processor. And here, the public involvement is like the road planning and pricing changing how to go to the public involvement. So that is rather new, because I think that's a reflex that we're thinking of the new leadership in the State Council, and also the reporting public transportation cost and service quality to the audience. And they set up the performance evaluation system. That is a particular MOT emphasized for this, because the local governments have more responsibility for the development of the public transportation, and we want to do the benchmark for all the cities. They can actually to know your neighborhood what they are doing better, or really what we need to learn. And so the provincial government in charge of the sovereign and the guidance. The central government actually, I think that is one of the first the boys have been taken off to try to speed up the development of the public transportation. And currently, the urban public transportation law is under drafting. I think it's through 1 or 2 years. Actually, that are already working 10 years now, and it will become in the near future. I think that is the future thing. It's not happened yet. And then the seventh, that's also for the future. I think that's a very tough work. And I proposed the develop the sustainable financing for the public transportation. And currently, we had a few tags only for the highway, because that have been clearly to say the highway law. And we cannot use this, plus the vehicle person tax can be only used for the highway and waterway, and also for the particular for the some of from railway. And actually, for the fuel subsidy, that is it was before. It's only central government given to the local. And through the internet, actually, they give the number how much they have been consumed, and directly from to the company itself. And so the Route 1, we hopefully in the future will be the National Public Transportation Fund. although that is difficult, we China's funding system, unlike I think the Western country, you have the fuel tax directly to working on the transport. And another one, I think another road try to there is a transfer from the central government to the local that is a balanced different region development, and also for the city and the rural. And that means that we hopefully will be and plus the water supply education that are already there, but for the public transportation that is not there. We hope that the TDM message can have some of the generating funding, and also together with we had the city maintaining fee as well together to be the local fund. And here the familiar currently we have been used for the funding for the transportation. You see the highway population car, but without public transportation. Our recommendation comes after we need to enter something for the public transportation. And then, of course, we will say there is a change in the low price because the government strongly controls the pricing. Every year we will receive the message from the government says that the public transportation cannot increase in the fee. And then the government gets the bonding, and the customer have not the best service is not good as they think. And of course, the company running on the debit. That's the situation here. So that's in the guidelines, it's enhanced. They change the low cost. The ticketing pricing towards the high quality service of the public transportation. Crosstrack is working as the thinking tank to provide the policy support for the MOT as well as the cities. Thank you so much and for your attention. Thank you.
So again, thank you very much. That's a lot of new developments being presented through this presentation. Certainly we see movements in this national government vis-a-vis the local government and strong guidance given in some areas, which should lead to some discussion as to how to implement that in the future. I'd like now to open the floor firstly to our distinguished discussion panel members. Mr. Zhang Haitao, Mr. Steve Lewis-Workman, Fang, and Guo Jifu. Please, going to start with Mr. Jiang. What is your initial thoughts and reactions to the two presentations that you have heard? You need to do something electronic with that.
Hello. Firstly, I would like to thank you for excellent presentation from Mr. Daniel and Dr. Jiang. And you know, urban transportation is getting popular in China. And because urban transportation topic always related to traffic congestion and energy saving and CO2 emission. And I would like to say urban transportation is a tough issue and challenge in China, and finance, money is the most tough questions in China. So I'm very glad to be here and take this moment to discuss the financial issues and the challenges in China. Thank you.
Steve, can I invite you?
Sure. Thank you very much for your presentations. They were very interesting and timely, I think. I'd like to just preface what I'm going to say with the experience of ADB, perhaps unique, but we're working in smaller cities in China. We're not working in Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou, where they're perhaps doing more innovative things. Most of our cities we're doing urban transport, BRTs. In the biggest city is Lanzhou, which is maybe 3 million people, and we have some other cities we're also building BRT around that are currently about 500,000 population to 1 million. So it's a different context. But just to build on it, we've mentioned the fuel subsidy. In the I guess the 3 cities where I've looked at what the fuel subsidy provides, it's between 5 and 10% of the bus operating expenses in those cities. So it's a substantial, but not a massive, transfer. In China, the price of public transport is generally very low, which ADB supports, because we generally don't want to say we're increasing the cost of public transport to the most vulnerable users. We're there to serve the poor, so we support it. But it does require municipal subsidies, and generally municipal subsidies are between 20 and 40% of the operating budgets in the smaller cities that we're working in. So what I think this comes down to, and what Daniel mentioned earlier, is that it's a general question of municipal finance, not just transport finance. And in the cities I've been working in, the land sales actually provide about 70% of municipal government revenues. So if you think about that for a second, these cities are basically dependent on selling more and more land on the periphery of the urban area just to finance everything, not just public transport, to finance everything. And in my view, this is not sustainable and has a lot of pernicious effects. So I'll just kind of list them. I think it results in too much urban expansion too fast, and it creates transport problems that weren't there before, because you're increasing people's trip distances, you're increasing the number of trips they take, and you're reducing the sustainability of the modes that they're using. It also results in overinvestment and misallocation of investment, because in order to get more money, you need to get access to more land, so you have to invest more and more in your road network to get out there, sell that land, and then you have to keep doing it, and it becomes like a, an ongoing perpetual motion machine. And China is the only, just a quick story, is the only place I've ever been where you look at a travel forecasting model, and in the baseline scenario, it shows average speeds faster 20 years from now than they are today. If anyone who's developed travel forecasting models knows how bizarre that is. So the investment levels in these cities and the type of roads that are being built are very, they're high grade, they're high class, and they're wide and they're fast, and they're much faster than the roads there were before. It's actually overwhelming the demand. And that's a result of the municipal finance system. So in my mind, before China starts shoveling more and more resources into building, more and more urban transport in these burgeoning cities, they need to fix the municipal finance system so that the local governments have some other source of revenue besides land sales, whether it's property taxes or whether there's a way to allow piggybacking of local revenue on top of, all that are already national taxes. You could conceive of local portion of the fuel tax would be a possible revenue source. And there are many other revenue sources. So in my mind, this needs to be fixed before we go, establishing big national sources of revenue to finance more subways or other urban infrastructure.
Thank you. Fang, please.
Thank you for the nice presentations and also comments by the other panelists. I just have a very quick comment. Maybe if I have time, one quick question. I think since China is so big, I fear any kind of a generalized statement about China could easily go wrong. So when we talk about China at a national aggregated level, all the numbers look scary. I think that's something we need to be a little bit careful. In terms of financing, I'm actually less worried about where the money comes, whether China has enough money to finance the urban infrastructure. I'm more worried because I think previous speakers already present options. I feel, at some stage, Chinese government, national, local government will start doing something when they realize they are short of funds. They will take action, and they can do it very fast. They will not take a long time here to discuss before the physical cliff. But I'm more worried by how the money is spent. Whether it's spent in a cost-effective way, whether the money is wasted, and how all the plans and the projects are prepared, and how the the financing arrangements are prepared. As Steve already mentioned, lots of these particular projects are not really prepared in a very thorough way, which really choose the cost-effective solutions. I think that's a big challenge. If you keep wasting money, and if you put the whole system in the situation, everything has to be subsidized. And if we treat the public transport as a purely social project and just subsidize and considering all the public transport infrastructure just for the poor to use, I think that really has to be worried, because that could put the whole urban transport development into a situation which I think many of them probably have lots of experience from other countries would know that will never get back to the good situation. So that's my quick comment.
Please.
Thank you. Yes. I'm excited to join this discussion, and thanks to the two excellent presentation, the introductory presentation about the transport problem in China. What I to comment is I totally agree with Fang's comments. China is a big country, and if you discuss the problems in China, you must be very careful. For example, in most cities in China, currently the finance for the funding of the transport is majorly from land sale. It's true. However, if you look at data in Beijing, it's different. Okay, the land sale only accounts for about 30%. Okay, and in the central government, the money is majorly from the fuel tax, including the registration fee of the vehicle. But in local government, it's totally different. Okay, the major money is from the local tax. Okay, we have two taxes. One is the national tax, another is the local tax. And also land sale, and also the general tax. For example, like the industrial income or commercial sales tax, something like that. Okay, so it's although the budget concern in many cases in China, in the most cities, is a big problem already. However, the things there is also changing very fast. Okay, I think the most challenges here currently in China is still the growth. Okay. For example, in the case of Beijing, the master plan 10 years ago, they estimate the population in Beijing will be 20 million to the year 2020. However, at the end of the year 2010, the population already 20 million. And it's estimated in the year 2030, the population in Beijing will be 30 million. Okay, so that's transport. I believe in China, the next 10 or 20 years, the urbanization is still a big concern of the country, and the needs for transport, especially for the public transit system, will be a major concern. Of course, the budget problem is also a major concern, but I would say it's like the growth of the nation. The financing is also changing. For example, in the situation in many cities in China, we found that the parking is almost free currently. For example, it's totally free, nearly totally free in Beijing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You'd like to respond to some of the comments?
Yeah,
please.
I appreciate all of the comments. I want to respond on one issue that was raised by Fang and Jifu about whether the national funding is appropriate to help out with any reforms in the funding system at all. So, and I just want to input some experiences from Germany, where we had a national program that was linked to specific criteria to fund specific projects in the 70s. And in this program, we had also support for subway construction. So it turned out that, of course, there was a lot of good things going on because of that. But at the same time, we also saw some adverse effects, especially that some cities starting to plan and build subways, they were just too small for having a subway. So it would have been much better a tram or bus system or something like this. So it triggers also some difficulties between the national level to do something and then the local level how to come up with these issues. So the reform then was to involve more the state level, I mean the provincial level. And I think in China, it's also, the provinces are very important because China is so big and it's so different from place to place, so that the provinces might play also a further role. Now in Germany, there is some budget for public transport from the national level, but it's without condition channeled through the Länder, into the provinces. So, and then they develop criteria for their cities to support them, and they measure the performance, and they think about linking cities through regional rail and so on. So it might be something that could be also discussed in the future in China to see how the provinces could be involved.
Thank you. Madam Judge, did you have any comments from the responders?
Yeah, actually, I appreciate the Asia Bank have been working on the city, which is not so bigger. And that is actually the 75% of the people living in the city, which is less the population than 3 million. So actually, that is the bigger. I think we have to be a big effort working in this, and of course for the financial. I think that Daniel said that will be something we need to consideration. That China is the one province, just like one country. It's so bigger and so different. How to take the advantage of the provincial government, that is a huge sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to point to one topic that I see emerging here is the discussion about the revenue captured from land sales. On the one hand, it is, and we see it too, an interesting source of revenue one time to help finance the investment in urban transit in various ways. And on the other hand, there is the danger of that land not actually being central to the system, but peripheral to the system, and therefore the system has to grow to catch up with that peripheral growth of the city. So how would you see that theme as taking land value capture and do it right? And how to control that? Are the institutions in place in the cities that actually need to do that most, between 5 and 6 million people, that where there is a need for investment, where there is potentially land value to be captured? Are there ways to manage that better than having land sprawl result in a negative vicious circle evolving? Are there ideas happening? Is it a recognized problem? And are there already policy movements or directives or guidance that make positive use of land value capture rather than negative impact? Does any of the panel members have signals from the field, if you will, where that's recognized and being dealt with in a constructive, positive way?
Ren, can I say a few words first? Okay. In China, we're doing quite a lot of urban transport projects, including some urban rail projects in Kunming, Zhengzhou, Nanchang, and quite a lot of this kind of integrated public transport project. And we are actually helping the city, those cities, trying to figure out and implement the TOD concept. I think using land to get money for infrastructure development is, it's not a really bad thing. Many countries have done that. Japan, Singapore, Korea, and China actually learned from Singapore and Hong Kong when they started this kind of land sales. But the problem is where to sell this land and how you sell this land, in what phase, and how you link that land development together with your infrastructure. So obviously the TOD concept is good for China to pick up so that they could integrate land development and infrastructure together, and also get infrastructure to support the new development and also get the revenue back to finance the infrastructure. It's in a very early stage. I know probably some other Chinese cities under their own initiatives are also testing this concept. Maybe some audience sitting here can share their experience. In our project cities, all these initiatives have just started. We are discussing at both national and the local level, because to get the TOD implemented, there are still quite a lot of challenges from regulatory part, from planning part, from the actual practice, and the issues identified by previous speakers are all there. You know, this coordination among different department agencies.
Mm-hmm. Any more comments on this topic, on the land, managing the land use, managing the land sale without causing sprawl? The TOD is clearly a theme around the transit systems, but how do you manage the peripheral issues?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of good examples where you know, the Energy Foundation has helped to develop some interesting cities. One near Kunming. It's kind of a satellite city, but using the TOD concept, they helped develop. It's actually a very interesting project and kind of ground. Yeah, yeah, and also one near Chongqing. Yeah. So you know, those are great examples. They're unique and kind of just the beginning. And I think, you know, there's a lot of problems in convincing local governments that this is the way they need to go for a variety of reasons. The developer community has come up with this modality where they want a super block and then they replicate the same building over and over again. You know, it's very efficient to construct, but it ends up making cities that are, you know, not very walkable and very single-use oriented, and it's a struggle to convince them that they get more value out of developing in a different way. But I think it can happen. It's just you hope that the ideas change before too much of this other investment, you know, that's not so sustainable is done. Is that going to cause, you know, great difficulties in the future or not? I'm not so sure.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Just like to follow the points here, I would say just a few weeks ago, the national government has released suggestional advices on the public transport development for Chinese cities. A big change in that document is the allow to develop the land development and integration with the transport infrastructure. Because before that, it's not a possibility to integrate, to do the land development and the infrastructure together is impossible before, you know. So that's a big change. I mean that in that document, the government already noticed that the public transit is the totally important to the sustainable growth of the city and also the sustainable transport system, you know. And the key point there is before that, the major financing sources, I mean, the money is raised by the government. Okay, so in the future, and the money, some cities already has raised the money from the private sector, like the bank loans, not just the bank loans, and also some private sectors, and including the integration with the transit construction, the station surrounding land development.
Okay. Yes. Any more comments from the floor here? Yeah.
A quick comments I want to make. Basically, TOD, I fully agree, is a very good concept, but my understanding is going to do the good work in new developed area. So for the developed area, we have to look for some other solutions. So like Beijing, and in the CBD area, you have no land to use, and the land there is fully occupied. So we have to look for some solution like a travel demand management, and to control the total number in that area or the usage there. So I think is we have to, when we talk about the solution to the city on urban transportation issue, we have to consider the area is new developed or the current developed well. Yeah.
Thank you. Madam.
So I think it's very important comments here on the TOD and the finance system, also integrating them. I want to put one issue as well on the agenda. This is about property tax that currently does not exist in China, where it comes about sources of funding and capturing also the land value somehow. So this might be something that I would be very interested to look in. So it's a question also to the others here, these experts on these issues that maybe have studied that much further before. So whether this is something to look at. And I want to just, in relation to that, say one thing that came out of the workshop that we did as well is there was a suggestion on starting a piloting of new financing or funding systems in China. So I think it has a long history in China to do some pilots before rolling it out to the big country, but testing it somewhere. So might that be a possibility out of your perspective as well to see, is piloting new forms of financing like property tax or so, would that be possible in one of the Chinese cities?
We'll hang on to that. To the answer. Madam, please. Yeah, you had a comment before.
Yeah, actually, the land value is like one of the big sources for the local government. And it was 3 years ago, the central government tried to do something, but it's very difficult. And none of them have been located. Some of them are really located for the transportation in some of the city. I think that's just 3 to 5%. And on how that is the way we can use. We cannot ignore. And on the other hand, the central government want to regulate this one, and how we can, because that is the currently increasing resources. Of course, that is the one kind of the dangers we should remove. And on the other hand, the central government have also noticed that there is a debate for the local government, and also some of the privacy taxes are still going on discussion. I think there is maybe some way, need some time to be realized. Thank you.
Is one of the thoughts perhaps from the central government or from your working groups, making distinction between using land sale revenue for investment or for operating costs of the city? I think if you use revenue from sale of land, which is financed for continuous operating costs, you will run into trouble at some point. Is there thinking in terms of, from the central government or for provincial government, some regulatory framework that says it's okay to sell land as a city to counter your investment costs, but it's not okay to operate your city in this manner?
Yes, I think they are discussing.
That's exactly where the discussion is going.
Yeah, that's very hard, but it's still...
So that's a new channel of thinking to regulate the use of land for investment, but not for operating costs.
It will be coming, I think, this year or next year.
Okay.
I think I will read some...
So I'll take note of that. Talking about operating costs, one topic, may I not throw it to the floor? One topic I'd like to test a little bit is the low fares. Having been an operator in the past, with $1 per day fare, I could break even up on the operating costs. But if we were charging 3 cents or 7 cents per day, I wouldn't break even not operating costs. But if you would introduce increases of fares, you obviously have a challenge between the interests of making your system sustainable and the affordability of the people that have to use the system. So where do you see that tension actually resulting in a loss of revenues or a loss of ridership? How is that going to play out? Does anybody have any ideas as to how feasible it is to actually raise the fares and not have a revolution on your hands from the user community?
Yeah, actually, that has been discussion in Shenzhen. I think that is a pilot area for the Chinese policy taking place. And they have been discussing since 5 years ago, they have been used the cost-based subsidy. The subsidy have been increasing 3 times. And the network have been increasing 25% or something, but it's cannot matching. So the government concern, that is given actually for the company itself, they want to have more money, just increase the cost.
Yeah.
I think that's the way. So currently they are thinking about how we can break in this. It's not the real way. So they will give the IC card for everyone freely.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you use the IC card, you will get the subsidy from the government. And if you are not IC card, that means you come from
full
not
fare.
regularly, not regular for the buses user.
Full fare.
Yeah, so you will feel free. But I think they will after Spring Festival they will get the province to do the pilot. Of course, that is very difficult for the people to understand. It's really increasing the fare. But we have already get some the survey. That is the price 10 years ago. It's almost the same price today. We try to reach the 3 yuan per.
That's the problem.
So it's increasing the cost, but the price have been decreased, not just like zero. So this is I think this kind of testing is more likely in the future, because in the future we want that it have been not relation with current people to failing. I remember I have traveled in Germany. They increase the fare very slightly, but keep going. I think that's some of the way.
Thank you. I will open the questions to the floor, please. I think that's where the mic is. Yeah.
I'm Graham Smith. I was in the Beijing office from 2002 until 2006 before I retired. And Liu Zhe and I took a look at the urban transport financing situation in a paper we put out in, 2005. I'd be curious to know whether anything has changed since then as regards a couple of things. I do remember that at that time, at least, cities were not legally allowed to borrow, which seemed anomalous and therefore interfered with the normal discipline that a city would have to be subject to in planning its investment and its operating budgets. Okay, municipal companies could borrow, but not the city as such. And I would be interested to know whether that has been rectified or whether it in fact doesn't make that much difference. The other thought I had a thought of basic scale. Within a 25-year generation, the number of urban people was going to double. The size of the urban economy was going to go to 4 times, which is to say the housing, the schools, the shops, the factories, all of that would have to be multiplied 4 times to what it was in, let's say, 2000. And the car fleet would be 6 times greater. So where you're going to find space was a dilemma. But one of the things that we explored, and I think Fang will remember back then, looking at incentives that could be given to cities to innovate in terms of policy. Generally speaking, we were talking in those days about perhaps using GEF funds to provide incentives for cities or provinces that were willing to experiment, were willing to try the trial approach that you mentioned earlier. Has that situation changed? Is it possible for cities to compete for national level funds through their willingness to test particular experimental solutions?
We'll hang on to that question for a second, please, panels, if you remember that for a bit. Next, I'll do 3 questions at a time.
My name is Zhang. I'm from EMBARQ DC, and I want to second Dr. Franker's opinion about for Chinese, we are less worried about the source of the funding, but more worried about how the funding is spent. And so my question is a follow-up to that statement. So in terms at the national level, what kind of policy or programs do you think can kind of better encourage the local government to spend the money in the right way, in a cost-effective way? And so how can we make things happen just to leverage the national power to influence the local policy?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Reja. I'm the new country sector coordinator for transport in Beijing office in China. I think today's presentation is really, really nice, and that gets to the heart of the issues that many cities in China are grappling with. I've only been there a couple of months now, but financing seems to touch quite a lot of issues, not just from a sustainability point of view, but the sort of incentive also it creates in terms of the way the financing is generated and how cities behave and how they plan. And so really looking at the financing framework for urban transport, not only is just about getting money and getting money for investment or operation maintenance, but it's also about changing the incentives of city planners and the behaviors of people in terms of how and where they invested. So actually sort of my comment and question is that when we think in terms of financing, how we link financing with planning, how does the money follow plan, who actually will, like, for example, where the National Development and Reform Commission, also known as NDRC, looks at the plans, what are they looking at it? Are they just looking at the plan and its own merit, or do they look at the plan in terms of integrating it with other plans? So perhaps this is where I think before the finance flows into the plan, whether other aspects, I mean, like for example here in the US, the NPOs are supposed to look at into air quality strategy, land use plans, before the Federal Transit Administration or any funding agency provides the money. So sort of I think the intersection between funding and planning is where probably the next generation of thinking we have to do, but I think excellent presentation and panel discussion. Thanks.
Yeah. So thank you. I have three questions that are very closely related. Are there, as Benja was suggesting, some central government criteria around NDRC thinking that would qualify cities for receiving funds, or GEF type of innovative challenges to receive funds? And certainly the third question also asked, what are the ways in which we can encourage good quality investment, as Fang had suggested? Are there any responses from the panel on this area of ensuring the money is well spent, and are the criteria being developed perhaps from NDRC to ensure that?
Yeah, I think that's the Chinese expert. As you know, the NDRC is generally managed as I think the per budget. Yeah. Let's say the investment. We also, I think that's linked with the integrated planning and with the funding and through the organization. I think that's the way for the international experience. But for China, currently, we have been sliced in different, in different departments. And I think this will come to, hopefully, it will come to the next 5 years. And I think you might notice that in the MOT planning, we still call it the road and water plan. Then the urban transportation is part of insight. And also for the metropolis program, and the next week, the minister will discuss how financed from central government. I think that's tough because the currently law or regulations is not there. But of course, they are trying to set some of the mechanism, of course, detail the criteria, and because that procedure have come to the many applications. Many cities give the application, have selected the few one. They have the very good planning, and the whole the policy support, including the land and also including the finance, as particular for the more ambitious. But how the funding for them, how the evaluation them, that is very important part. I think that's really need to thinking. Back to the U.S. the integrated transportation planning. I think that's the way I think that we could learn from this from outside as well.
Exactly. So this is happening next week.
Yeah, they will discuss very hardly. I think I know they are
so
preparing.
it's going to be an interesting week. So thank you for any other comments from the tape from the.
In China, in city level, I'm very glad you talk about the plans, because in China, in local level, and the cities are developing the urban master plan and the land use plan and the comprehensive transportation plan. The first two plans focus on the urban form and the urban development. The comprehensive transportation plan most talks about the infrastructure and how to invest the infrastructure and the infrastructure construction. But we can see there is a gap between the urban development and the urban transportation. So, and I think it's probably here we can learn some international experience on that. For example, and in my point of view, and like a urban comprehensive mobility plan is a very nice plan, I suggest for Chinese cities. So in such of the goal of such that plan is strengthening the local policy and local planning and the effectiveness of the investment rather than financing the construction. So in that plan will make the planning of urban transportation more sustainable, more transparent, and more predictable. So I think also the local, the key criteria for that plan is probably that plan allows the local government to get some money from national level also, as well as from the private sector. So I think it's at least we can start with the mobility plan, and for the central level, and I also suggest the central government and the central government could do the review and approval for the mobility plan and do the budget. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Add 2 points. One is how to spend the money more efficiently. Okay, back to the low fare concern. Okay, in Beijing, the bus fare is the lowest is 3 cents. Okay, and the metro is only 50 cents. No, 30 cents. Okay,
30 cents US
for the whole system. 400 kilometers metro, you can use this. Okay, only at a cost of 40 cents. So, and the subsidies for the public transit last year in Beijing is 15 billion. Okay, 15 billion. Okay, so many people would ask the question: why the government not increase the fare and save the money to use it more efficiently? For example, to improve the level of the services. I don't know. I don't know either. Okay, but I would like to add one point here is, you know you notice there's one word in the slides in Dr. Jiang is the NDRC of China has the responsibility to control the price. Okay, the public transit fare is a very important factor to influence the CPI. So it's another case for the municipal government of Beijing to raise the fare, the public fare. Okay, this is one I'd like to add, to emphasize. Another one is the support from the central government. In the case of Beijing, absolutely. Okay. thinking about the situation here in Washington, I don't know whether what would happen if the federal government spend no money here. Okay, so I strongly support the point that central government spend some money to improve the local transport, not just the roads. Should be include at least the metro system, especially in the near future. I believe in most cities, big cities in China, is the suburban railway system. Okay, thank you.
Two quick comments, one Fang, and then you, and then back to the floor.
Just to respond to the question about how to help cities invest more wisely, more cost effectively. Currently, in China, we are not only working with the cities to help do better projects, but at the national level, we are also working with NDRC, MOF, MOT on many issues, but there are two important aspects. One is working with NDRC and its engineering company, which reviews all the metro projects to improve their appraisal process. For example, to include this alternative analysis process into the current feasibility study system, which doesn't have that, and strengthen the economic analysis, financial analysis, etc. And the other part is to advocate this national funding. So Daniel, just to clarify, I'm quite supportive of having a national financing scheme for urban transport at the national level, because money talks. You know, national government can set up lots of good policies, guidance, even setting these requirements in appraisal. But in the end, the urban transport projects are implemented by cities. If all the money for those projects come from the city themselves, it's going to be very difficult to really for the national government to ask the city to follow this, to follow that. The city may not. Yeah. So I think the lessons and good experience learned from US and also India and other countries seems to suggest that in order to actually address the urban transport problems, which have not only local aspect but also national interest, the national government should become a partner and put in some money and then work together with the local government and ensure that kind of sustainable development. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. I'm sorry, I keep reaching out to the floor now for a few more questions. Please feel free to join the questioning. Others.
Thank you, Dario Hidalgo, EMBARQ. I am impressed for one specific aspect that was in the presentation of Dr. Zhang Yullin, and is the fact that they have the incentives with the performance. And this is a really great example of model share, of reduction on fatalities and these kind of things. It's really, really very interesting. And there was another slide where the formula was there, and one of the terms in the formula was the number of cars. So you receive more money if you have more cars. So how you combine these two things, and what we can do to improve and help from the outside to improve these eventual grown incentives in the funding mechanism.
It's very clear there is a tension between those two incentives, historically grown, obviously. Any sense, Madame Jiang, as to how to break this knot?
Yeah, that's currently the central government formula for the transfer from the central money to the local. They have the proportion for the car and for the highway. So that we are making effort to try put them to how they have the public transportation sharing. But it means that how we can calculate the sharing, then come to a scale. So that is on the way. I think we need to think in really including the public, the fuel subsidy. At national level, just everybody have said that we need to refine the framework. Yeah. And also, there are not many changes as Greg, you were there. And also, I would like to say there is like Shenzhen, it's a case, maybe you can test your integrated transportation planning, because there NDRC almost, and planning have been dissolved. and transportation, currently in take charge of the infrastructure and planning together. I think that's the kind of the place we can really take it seriously to consideration in the next step for the reform. Thank you.
Final comment from here.
I just want to highlight very shortly one issue that might be responsible, or that might be very important for this kind of performance assessment and so on. So I just want to put into the discussion the question of raising funds through TDM, because I think there's a couple of policies out there that help cities also to get some funding in. So in order to get approval, and in China I think many big projects, they need the approval from the national government or provincial or so on. So also putting inside this system any kind of approval, so only giving approval if there's also a certain amount of funding that is raised through the users and is raised through through some parking policies or any other things, that is going back into the budget and helping the city to develop on its own further on.
Thank you very much. I think that's a great final comment. Unless there are other burning questions, I'm instructed to wrap up the session. But I think this final comment does look like the beginning of a virtuous circle. If the cities can generate their own revenue through TDM type of activities, which in themselves improve the performance of the city and restrict some of the driving behavior, to fund to some extent the public transport system, which will be again incentive for NDRC to recognize this behavior by the city and support that type of investment. We have covered fairly much a couple of key issues. One is the funding from the local side. One is the potential from the national side. The sustainability of the low fares, I think, is something which next week will be something exciting to follow. And the land use paradigm, we've seen good examples of how to do it right. There are obviously many examples where there's still sprawl happening, but certainly if the incentives become visible, then I think that there's potential for that behavior to shift to something much more sustainable and virtuous. So thank you very much to the panel. Please help me thank the panel and the speakers. Thank you for your thoughtful questions and your participation. I think the session is adjourned. Thank you very much. I think it's time for coffee outside in the hallway. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.